Thank you. Yeah, it's something like the continuation of a talk that I gave in 2019, both here and on many other occasions, because I'm a retrofuturist in private. Professionally, I work with actual new technologies, and in private, I look at the future technologies of the past. And today, of course, we know what's real and what isn't, and we can have a look at how badly they got the future wrong back in the days. It's not going to be entirely serious, of course. There are going to be some serious summaries at the end, but it's part of the entertainment program. I'll be speaking about technological ideas for renewable energies from a past that's often called the atomic space age, the time from 1945, when the opportunities and possibilities of nuclear energy were shown to the world with the atomic bombs that were dropped on Japan, until the years around 74, 75, when the Apollo program and the Space Lab program were finally ended by NASA. It's almost completely analog. The digital natives weren't born, but people were thinking about interesting technologies. Renewable energies are silly, of course. Physically, no energy can be truly renewed according to thermodynamics. But what we understand as renewable energy is energy that comes from the sun, the earth, and the moon in part. So energy that we get from outside. So when we use light here, it's missing on the sun, but of course the sun radiates that energy anyway, so it's not missing that. Of course, Earth is radiating energy as well, the Earth core. And this radioactive decay on the inside of the Earth prevents our Earth from turning into a large clump of ice. That, of course, is going to stop one day because it's not truly renewable. As for interesting concepts, we'll be looking at light, at wind energy, at energy from the seas, and even more exotic methods. The first thing we're going to look at is this progress, this idea from 1949 for catching energy from the sun. The idea is quite simple. You have this heat bin. You focus this energy, and then you let it radiate down to the living room. So you have this happy family that's being warmed. The temperature must be similar to a sauna. And I'd also be careful with these rifles on the wall. I hope they're not loaded, because it's not a great idea. Of course, this is the United States, and it was an idea from Popular Science in '49. It was pretty clear that you can turn solar energy into electricity pretty early on, but it took a while to refine that. In the 50s, the Bell Labs, which also created the transistor, made some progress on that. And this photo shows one of the possible inventors of the solar cell, showing his family what he's invented. He has this stick in his hands. It might also be a family that's got nothing to do with solar power, and that's also simply playing fetch with their dog, and just happened to stumble upon this solar cell on in the park. You see the dad looking at this, and the son is looking at the photo effect. very interestedly, and the mum is standing in the back row and admiring this and saying, "Oh, I don't get this at all." And of course, God is shining down from above. It's the first of its kind, the first solar battery of its kind that creates electricity from solar power. This is another man conducting experiments on this device. It was first used in the space race between the Soviet Union and the United States. The first satellites, such as Vanguard, used these solar cells because people understood that you can use this to power satellites in space. So they tried this. Here we are on some distant planet. It might be the moon, it might be Venus, who knows. They landed with a rocket that you can see on the right in that traditional pencil shape. By the way, it landed backwards in the same way that Elon Musk's rockets do today. It's standing on its tail. And you see the inventor with the solar cell shaking the device to check if it's working. And his colleague is preparing the antenna that they're going to be using to call for help, because those cars down the valleys are turning away from them. It's completely pointless, but that's how people were trying to explain the space age to their readers. Another interesting feature is that it's the one completely cloudless day on Earth. There's no atmosphere at all. A little later, under President Eisenhower, a large proponent of nuclear energy, but also the space race. I mean, he won the Second World War and was also going to, or he wanted to win the space race as well. And they invented the solar butterfly. That's light-powered, which directly converts solar power into a rocket engine, or into rocket fuel. This is also from 54, and here too there's no atmosphere, no cloud on Earth. And that seems to be a recurring theme in the 40s and 50s. Each and every time we depict Earth, there's no atmosphere. Apparently, that was unimaginable. Whenever old comics, old animations show a cloudless Earth, that's before 67. And after that, people realized, these artists realized, that there's such a thing as an atmosphere. That seems to be something people didn't really realize before. Of course, people saw clouds from below, but they didn't think that you'd be able to see them from above as well. All that changed when 3 white American soldiers
Amerikanische Soldaten in einem Raumschiff einmal den Planeten rumgeflogen sind.
Took a trip around the Earth in a rocket, and on the way back they took a photo in 1968 on the Apollo 8 mission, and they took the first picture of Earth, this Earthrise, the famous Earthrise photograph, where you see the Earth rising on the moon's horizon. That's when this idea of an atmosphere became pertinent. And when climate change became as well, because people understood, oh, we've actually got clouds. The next pictures looked like this. There's the plan for the International Space Station from a pretty well-known futurist painter, Robert McCall. And on the right, you see what it really turned into, a photo from 2018, because even today, you can, on a clear day, you can see the ISS in the sky every 90 minutes, and it lights up in the skies in the mornings and evenings because they've got these light reflectors. They don't have any lights on board or any. Yeah. They've got these solar panels, and you can see it when it's dark on Earth, but still light up up where the ISS is when they reflect the sky. And we've still got some years left to do this. Robert McCall, yeah, he considered other ideas as well, something that the European Union is also considering these days, a universal plug or a universal charger for devices of all kinds. And what he envisioned was that all nations on Earth would be sending their own rockets to the ISS, and then you need to have these adapters into which you could plug various rockets. He didn't actually think about energy. There's some light shining out of the left side here. There's no solar panels though, and you've got these motorized robotic arms grabbing the space shuttle, but I think he was envisioning nuclear power.
And if you've been watching the press and since 2018 or 2016, reports keep cropping up, for example, here in Google, for example, at Chip E-Fahrer magazine or on YouTube, well-known scientific publication, scientific journal even, where people keep talking about solar power from space or in space. So it's either a European country or it's China. I'm kind of waiting for Elon Musk, and maybe he's currently otherwise occupied, but it keeps recurring. In 2019, it's China. 2021, it's somebody, maybe even Switzerland. Then Deutschlandfunk 2021. There was the European Space Agency. Then National Geographic. Will there be solar power plants in space soon? We're also concerning ourselves with media, so basic rule, if there's any publication that has a headline of will there be X, then the answer is always no. You can be sure of that, because if the answer was yes, then they wouldn't need to ask. Then it's China. China is building giant solar farms in space to produce energy. And then it's Great Britain, post-Brexit, the next big threat. The Brits are shooting sun rays at us with a complicated mirror construction that we can see here. And this reminded me of something else, old books, The New Universe, here in the edition from 1973, that already has a diagram of this principle. Somebody imagined you can just build some large solar panels, some large solar fields of 4 by 4 kilometers, put them into space. I'm not sure why it's 2 and not 4 or 17, but they're large, they're 4 by 4 kilometers, then a 1 kilometer diameter antenna that will then use a microwave beam that's probably capable of burning a hole into the earth. Then here you can see Saarland for size reference, so that's about the size of the hole. This was 1973, already a pretty good idea. There's been a lot of crazy ideas published back then, also in Popular Science. This has been printed in a youth science book. There are a lot of ideas because people put a lot of hope onto the space shuttle. So people thought with the space shuttle, where it's really easy to cheaply launch stuff into space, we can build anything possible in space. For example, here, 1973, again, the proposal to build a nuclear reactor in space. It's a great idea. If you cannot do it on Earth, then we just send it to space. And here you have a great space nuclear waste. Problems such as cooling without air or water, whatever. It's not clear how you would produce power here, whether it's with steam and turbines, how to get the energy down to Earth. These are just like classical engineering fantasies. It's just so cool. You just put a nuclear reactor into space, and we can solve the problems down the line. We do that when it gets to it. Of course, this is not possible. It didn't happen. It keeps cropping up in popular science publications today, but now they want to put the nuclear reactors in Earth. Curious here also, this plug or antenna or whatever. This might be the connector for the space station. I don't know if there's already a standard for this. So this was nuclear technology in space. Let's get back to solar. In the 60s, 70s, it remained a toy. There were the first solar-powered wristwatches, solar-powered pocket calculators. I had one in school. It was a great miracle. Some light on it, and it works. And in winter, you'd have to sit under artificial light so you could do your calculations. Then already in 1979, the first crewed solar-powered airplane was built. That worked. And then 1987, there was the first race with solar-powered vehicles. You can see one here on the right. There was the General Motors Sun Racer. And GM invested into a solar-powered car already in 1987. As we know now, cars are not powered by solar panels. As far as I know, Formula One, they still use gasoline. And it could also be these cars just look like crap. Like, honestly, this thing reminds me of these horseshoe crabs that are washed ashore dead, or any crustaceans that start smelling. And I would rather lay on the beach alive than sit in such a car. Well, maybe they just look too bad. Let's move on to wind. You all know solar from your daily life. And with wind, it was clear from early on that you can use it to produce power. Windmills are all technology, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 years old. And the idea to power a DC generator with wind power already happened in Cleveland 1888, and yield enough DC power to power 350 light bulbs, or for example the Christmas tree in front of the city hall.
Of course, it's the winds that hit the Earth's surface are turbulent due to trees and all kinds of obstructions, and that's why today you try to build windmills as high up as possible, because the wind is more and more even there. And people started to realize that even back in the day. There's a vision. There was a visionary in Germany, Honnef, who in 32 proposed these 430-meter high power towers. Yesterday I was talking to someone about how they translate this into sign language. I'd be interested to know. The Nazis then were interested in this technology, but started having problems with the engineers. Maybe he wasn't submissive enough, so they got into fights. Maybe they became more interested in building panzers, and this thing slipped into oblivion. And instead of building these things that would have made Germany independent of coal and oil, we started using coal and oil for power stations. And due to the sensational benefits of nuclear power, all efforts at the end of the Second World War went into the development of nuclear. So the first 20 years after the Second World War, almost nothing happened in the wind power field, even though good ideas existed. And this Mr. Honneth died basically forgotten. This is what it would have liked with 5 rotors. You would have been able to fold them down so that they no longer provide any resistance to the wind anymore. There were some private efforts to build these, for example, with this Typhoon wind power turbine. It's one of the most modern engines, a 5 megawatt turbine, and it's American, and you can see that because it looks a bit like a cowboy that's trying to stand in the way of the wind. It's got 30-meter engine blades, 5 propellers. There's this elevator shaft here. It looked pretty good. That's how far we got in the 1950s. It doesn't resemble anything we have today, of course. It was an idea. It ran for a time, then got turned off, and it's probably still standing somewhere and rusting because it was much more expensive than oil and nuclear. The Soviet Union had its ideas as well. This is from 1936, a combined house and wind power station, a wind turbine. They seem to be turning pretty fast. You'd probably have been able to look through these propellers because they're turning so fast, but it doesn't look like the tower itself is able to rotate due to the due to how it's attached to the ground. Maybe the Soviet Union was just trying to show that they could develop their ideas as well. Because, of course, of this famous Mr. Honneth, who proposed his ideas in the Weimar Republic. And if you look at the scale of this, it's almost an entire town with its energy provided from these masts. Of course, that means you need less cabling, so that's an advantage. Western Germany started its large-scale experiment in the 1980s, Grovian, the large-scale wind power station. It was supposed to be a memorable name in German, and they invested a spectacular 54 million Deutschmarks that would be able to provide 3 megawatts. They built these towers with these huge gondolas with 2 propeller blades, and it was a political activity trying to discredit wind power to show these nuclear opponents. That was the idea back in the day, and I have quotes to prove it. I'll show them in a moment. And Günther Klette, the board member of the RWE Power Corporation, was using it as a teaching model for nuclear, for proponents of wind energy, to show them that it wouldn't work. It worked for 5 years. It was mostly standing still due to technical defects most of the time. And in the background, you had these wind measurement towers that apparently were necessary back in the days. And of course, they chose something so complicated that it simply couldn't work and stopped the experiments in '68. But there were completely different ideas as well. Here you'd go up to 10 kilometers and have these fixed balloons, essentially, with 4 propeller blades, and in the middle you'd have these propellers in 10 kilometers altitude, that then send their power down on a cable. You'd also have been using them as an antenna, essentially, for television. This is larger than a bus, and of course there's always this danger that it could fall from the sky at any time. It's really dangerous. So, hey Elon, how about it? And there are more recent attempts at this as well, this time with these sailplanes, these energy kites. Makani Labs was then bought up by Google or Alphabet, and a few years later it was discontinued. As for the oceans, there are due to the moons, you have the tides coming in and out, and if you then build a dam in the ocean, you can send these currents through a turbine. There were no plastics back in the day in the sea, so today that would be a problem. You'd have to clean these turbines all the time, but the idea was that these would be providing energy twice a day. They combined the disadvantages of all the worlds. There are huge environmental challenge. They are really expensive. They are really inconsistent. So they're not useful
for the base load. So that doesn't stop anyone from taking this old concept out of the mathbox. And Siemens came out here, for example, in 2012, where they just put pillars into the sea floor. Why bother with wind if you could just put the propellers underwater? So Siemens is engaged there. Then there is one other manufacturer here called O2, not the phone company, who want to build swimming propellers. And that's what it looks like, Orbital O2. This is a publication from 2021, where they're trying to take something that looks like a spaceship or das Boot, a submarine, which is also back on TV now, except they attach two propellers here. So they're swimming on the surface of the ocean and produce power that then somehow gets to the shore. Then the other thing where the success was predicted in 1971 is heat pumps, where you create these gigantic buildings by the seaside, where you can see the metropolis in the background that is powered by this. So 10 to 20 stories high blocks with giant fans. They're pumping cold water from the ocean, and then the warm wind causes it to evaporate and power turbines, generate power. At the same time, we get ice-cold water, so this solves all the problems of humanity. The water is rich in nutrients. When it gets condensed here, it's then stored in these pools, which can also double as sea farming pools, grow fish. And so this gives you fresh water and food as well. And I guess you can also live in this and you have a nice seaside view, at least if you live on this side, and, well, a bit more challenging on the other side. And this has never been built, by the way. So 1971, Popular Mechanics, never been prototyped, never been constructed, never been mentioned again. Very new now, there's Osmosis Power plants, where you want to use fresh water or the differential in salt content and saline content, use osmosis to produce power. This already works in the lab with a few liters of water. It's not clear how this can be done on a larger scale, but people are working on it, probably because somebody's paid for it, and they want to replace 2,000 nuclear power plants, which requires using all the fresh water in all the river deltas in the entire world. Then you can replace 2,000 nuclear power plants. And this also introduced a new term that's even better than renewables, namely natural energy, natural or blue energy as well. That's even better than all the other energy, which is obviously unnatural and some other color. So now there's green, white, red, and now also blue energy. So keep your eyes open, check the press, keep an eye on Spiegel, Stern, Neue Zürcher. And as soon as the Chinese build something like this, we will do it as well. Definitely, certainly. One more thing, a bit more exotic, a picture from 1928. I'm not sure what they're doing there. People were still under the influence of Tesla, like the original, the guy who invented the Tesla coil and stuff. I think he was already pretty old back then, but still alive. And they were thinking whether you couldn't use the atmospheric electricity, catch that with a net, and so you don't have to build towers. You could just use a valley, for example, in the Alps, then charge this net through the air, maybe through wind, and then use an artificially created bolt of lightning to get this energy into a lightning power plant. So I'm guessing this was never implemented due to noise protection regulations, because there would have been resounding thunderclaps all the time in a valley in the Alps. So the mountains would always been thundering. So this was discontinued until 1921. Somebody else also looked at natural catastrophes here in 1977, where people were thinking about catching tornadoes. So here in the background, I guess New York. I don't know if New York has so many tornadoes. Maybe they would rather look at Kentucky or somewhere in the south in the US, which was in the media again recently last year when the factory collapsed. So you would just catch this tornado and that would just circulate and produce power. And you can see here the World Trade Center still standing, producing power. So the biggest challenge here is probably how do you draw tornadoes into New York? Maybe if you make a trail out of RVs or something to make the tornado follow that and then go into this power plant. So yeah, never heard of that before or again after. And you can already see there's the first
Nichts ist erneuerbarer als alte Konzepte. Also ich habe gezeigt hier
operators.
30er, 40er, 50er.
Okay, so I showed in the 30s, 40s, 50s, there's always somebody that's going to dig out these old ideas, or maybe the media doesn't have anything better to do. And then they just resurrect one of these journalistic zombies. Like, for example, stratospheric wind power. The concept should firstly be made super complicated so that we can then make them easier, simplify them. And finally, if something doesn't work out on Earth, Elon Musk is a good example, then just go to space. We've also seen it in the talk earlier about escaping to Mars, with Elon Musk and the other billionaires leaving us behind here because they don't want to be annoyed by regular people, by poor people. Then wind and sun were disadvantaged for political and strategical reasons, thanks to the nuclear lobby. Because in the Cold War and nuclear power plants were very important also to produce the resources needed for nuclear bombs. And AfD is still dreaming of the German nuclear bomb. And finally, there's energy sources all over nature. None of them are renewable in the technical sense, but there's a lot of them that we can just use. And only that which is profitable will actually be implemented. There's no other measure here. So maybe in the future we would also think about ecological factors and not just the money we can make. And the last point that I just added a few minutes ago, the biggest problem is the distribution of power. If you cannot produce it where it's consumed, and this applies not just to space, you have to make sure that energy is somewhere ending up where it should be used, where it should be consumed. And we talk a lot about the production of power, but not about distribution and storage. That's something we have to talk about. Everything else is technically solvable. Thank you very much also for sticking around. There's more people than I expected. especially there's Sascha Lobo on the other stage. So maybe you confused me because I'm wearing this red hat. But anyway, thank you very much. I wish you a pleasant evening and 2 more exciting days here at Republica. Thank you very much for having me. Was very happy to be here.